Welcome back, everyone. Spartan Scotsman here, comic book colorist, manga artist. Time for episode 2 of Coloring Comics. This episode is called Flatting. If you would take a moment, subscribe, hit the like button, and with that, let's get into it. Okay, here we have another page of Zetatype. We're going to begin flatting this page. Now, first of all, what is flatting? Flatting is the process of separating your printed page into selectable pieces so that whenever you want to go and render, you can select an entire face, copy it on top, make your shades and your gradients and your blends and your effects and your textures, and have underneath it that face, that selectable area never gets touched. So you can always go back and add to, change, modify, reselect, or whatever you like. The flats, they are there to help speed up the rendering process and to give you ultimate control and editability all throughout the rendering process. Because sometimes you'll render something and you'll need to make changes to it, or the color won't be quite right, or you'll want to change the mood or the tone. If you had to re-lasso every piece of the document to make changes, it would be a bit of a nightmare. So flatting is there to make selections. Now, does it matter what colors you use whenever you flat? No, they could be all grays, as long as when you make a selection, the color you make that selection is different than all the other colors that are touching it, so that you can use a magic wand and select that area. But what I like to do is I like to use the actual local color of the objects on the page. So if it's skin, I like to make it skin tone. If it's like a policeman's hat, we'll make it the appropriate color for their uniform, and so on and so on. That way you can have at least a close starting point for when you go to render. But again, it's completely not necessary to use the local colors whenever you go to render. So let's cover a couple other things. Our tool setup. Now, it's very important whenever you set up your tools, we're going to be using the polygonal lasso tool, that we make sure it has no anti-alias selected. Now, you might see an icon that looks like this up here. It's kind of hanging off the screen there. You might see an anti-alias button. You want to uncheck that, or you want to make sure this is unchecked. Now, what that does is that makes sure you get no semi-opaque pixels on your selection. So let's see, let me demonstrate. All right, we'll turn this off. We're going to go ahead and add another layer here. Now, if we get any color, doesn't matter, we're going to make a selection here and we're going to fill it. All right, so we've got a solid selection here. Now, if we select if we add anti-alias and we select within it, and now we fill with a different tool, notice now we have semi-transparent pixels along the edge. Well, if you use a magic wand and reselect that, you're not getting all the pixels. Now, the reason that's important is because when a comic book goes to print, printing shifts slightly. And so you want edge-to-edge pixels. You don't want any seam between color. You want it all to be touching other color. That way, if there is a shift in printing, you don't see transparent pixels showing through. And it makes your selections much cleaner. So let's make sure we never have any of our tools have anti-alias on. Your magic wand has an anti-alias button. Your paint bucket has an anti-alias button. Your lasso has an anti-alias button. You want to make sure while you're flatting, none of those are enabled. Okay, that's number one. Okay, so let's begin the flatting process. So one thing you can do in order to help to decipher a page, like this page is, again, very detailed, in order to see and make sure you're on the middle of a line, you can actually take the opacity down on your inks layer to 50%. Now, if you do that, you're going to want to make a layer, new background from layer, and make sure it's white. Now you notice the inks have turned gray. That's because they're semi-opaque. Now what this is going to allow us to do is we're going to be able to zoom in, and now we can see, as we make a selection, the middle of the line. And we can see as we fill that there's definitely, we're definitely in the middle of the line. Okay. So we don't want red. We're not going to do red. Okay. Another thing I like to do is I like to bring in a color palette. Now I like to copy this from document to document to make sure that my colors stay consistent. Now I know you can make a swatch palette in the swatches menu in Photoshop and other photo editors. But I like to have my color actually reside right here on the page, because then it's subject to the color profiling embedded in the document itself, and I can help to maintain color consistency with a great degree of accuracy. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off. We'll get a skin tone here. We're going to get the skin tone, and now we're going to go over to the policeman's face, make sure we're on the flats layer. We're going to get our lasso. We're going to make sure anti-alias is not on. And then we're going to zoom in and begin making selections. Now, when you use the polygonal lasso tool, or any lasso tool actually, it's a good idea to frequently end your selection. So don't make really complex selections all in one go. You want to select a little bit and then end the selection, and then select some more and then end the selection again. Why do I say that? Well, because you're going to find that sometimes you accidentally double click, and that will end your selection. So let's demonstrate. So if we add to this selection and we start selecting the hair, obviously we don't really need because it's black, but let's just say for the sake of argument, we select back and forth like this, and we make a very complicated selection. And we're going and we're going, and we accidentally double click. We'll see what happened here. It draws a line straight across. So if we make a selection like this, one that's really complicated, and we accidentally double click, now we've got, we look at our quick mask, now we've got that and that and that and that, and we didn't want that. We wanted a zigzag, but then a filled shape at the end of it, not, you know, not hopscotch. So make sure you end your selections frequently. You can even just fill as you go. So make a little selection, fill with background layer or background color or foreground color, Command delete or Option delete. Option delete is foreground, Command delete is background, and then slowly fill in the shape. So holding Shift, we're gonna start a selection, and when we want to add to the selection, you just hold Shift and you can add to it. Option delete. And there we go. We're starting to fill this shape in. Now, we've basically filled the eyes with skin tone, and that's okay. That's okay, because we can just go back in later and paint bucket a selection or Command delete with an eyeball color. Now, we're not going to do that for the teeth though, because I'm going to demonstrate something with the teeth. All right, so we're selecting around. I guess it's kind of hard to see my lasso. All right, we're going to end the selection. We're going to fill. All right. We're going down the chin. And now we don't need to go all the way down into the neck area. We can. It is a good idea to fill black shapes with color, because when you go to do color holds, which is another thing we're going to talk about later in a later video, when you go to do holds, it makes selecting a little bit easier and deselecting as needed. Okay, so now we're going to trace out these teeth. We're kind of feeling our way through the shape here. Let's go ahead and end this and fill. Let's zoom in a little bit. All right. We're going to start another selection. We're going to swoop around here. We're going to grab the teeth. Well, actually the skin, not the teeth. And we're going to stay in the middle of that line. And the selection and fill. Now we have a shape inside of here that is empty. So we turn the background layer off. We turn the inks off. There are no pixels in there. It's empty. So if we go in and we go and we get a color for teeth, I've been using, you never want to use white when you're filling things in. You always want to use some kind of tone. For my teeth and my eyes, I tend to use a cooler off-white. All right, so we're going to paste in there. Now we've got tone in there for the teeth. Now notice, there are no pixels in between. It's nice and sharp. Oh, see, we got one there. So we want to make sure we want to get rid of that. All right, one little pixel there. So we made sure we got them all filled in. And now we've got no space between the pixels. Now, we've got another color down here in the policeman's uniform that meets the skin tone. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to finish. I think that's skin down there as well. I think this is a collar. We're going to cut up into this. All right. Let's fill that like that. I think that's all neck. Okay. And if you need to zoom in, by all means, zoom in. As you can see, I'm selecting across very thin, tiny lines, and I'm dodging Zipatone, and I'm discerning what's part of the broader shape. And going into the ear. We're going to stay out of the hair here. All right, we're starting to get a big selection, so that's getting a little precarious. So we're going to swoop back and we're going to end that selection. We're going to fill, take a look, make sure we're good. Yep. All right. So we're just going to sloppy select this right now. We're not going to go too crazy here. We'll tighten this up later. And another thing to note too is if you're using the polygonal lasso tool, a secret tip, if you start a selection and you start to grow it, as you click, if you click down and hold your pen down, and then you hold down the option key and drag, you notice the icon changes. I don't know if you can see that or not. It changes to the freehand lasso tool. So you can switch, and when you let go, it goes back to the polygonal lasso tool. So it's a handy tip if you're hitting an arc and you need to quickly swoop and get a nice curve. Okay, so we've got the face selected. Now, whenever we make a selection of another color next to something that's already flatted, we want to select into the previous area. Now, let's go ahead and get, I think I was using, for the policeman's uniform, we're just going to use this navy. Just going to use this navy color for now. All right. So now we're going to start our selection in the skin tone. We're going to go down to the panel border, go like this, and we're going to cut upward here. Like that. Around. Swoop around the collar and into the skin tone. Now, we got a couple of choices we can make. If we option delete, we're going to fill the skin tone in. We don't want that. If we hit G and switch to our paint bucket, we can fill it that way. Or we can do another thing. If we turn our inks off and we observe really quick, you can see we've got our selection is going into the skin tone. Now, if we hit W for magic wand and we hold option, we get a little subtraction icon that shows up next to our magic wand. We hover over the skin tone, click, and we subtract that from our selection. Now this is helpful whenever we're selecting within a zone where there are a lot of different already flatted shapes. We can magic wand subtract from our selection, and now we can option delete and fill, and we've got no empty pixels. Okay, so that's pretty important. So we want to make sure we're building our flats edge to edge, always edge to edge. All right, so let's see, what's another example? Let's see. How about we go in here, we're going to get Balvor's red gem color, like that. And let's just go ahead and select here. Now, as you can see, there is no clear line here. It is just a thick shade. All right, so in that case, we want to select as close to the border as we can without going out into the zip tone. And it doesn't matter if it's a bumpy circle or not. Doesn't matter at all. This is going to be underneath the black lines. So we're building a selection, building that selection, getting all the way back around. And if we hold command, we can click, you notice you get a little circle there. It means close the loop. So we close it. And now we can switch to our paint bucket if we like and fill, or option delete, command delete, depending on where the color selection is at. And now we've got this filled shape underneath the border of that object. Okay, so I'm filling with local colors so that later on I can just take its color and begin to render on it. Now, it is a small shape within a broader body. Okay, so if we go over here and we get Balvor's fur color, which is that, we can then just make a broad selection around it like this, fill with the magic wand, or not magic wand, and fill with the paint bucket. And it goes all the way to the edges. And then from there, we can go ahead and go and start to fill in the broader shape, fill in the rest of his body. And then draw around, finish it, fill it in, and like that. And ultimately, at the end, we want a page that's covered head to toe, top to bottom with tone so that we can make our selections. Because right now, for instance, if we went here and we got our magic wand, we could select that entire face. And I have a Photoshop action that copies it and pastes it on top and locks its transparency. You can see over here in the layers menu, I've got an exact duplication of that shape with its transparency locked. Why is that important? Because when I go to render, I am not able to paint outside of onto the transparent pixels that are next to it. With its transparency lock, you can use your selection, duplicate on top, lock the transparency, and begin to shade and render. Now, where is that at? This right here, this lock icon at the top of the layer stack, you'll see this thing looks like a checkerboard. That's the transparency lock. When you make a selection on top, lock its transparency, and you can shade and render all you want. So if we go here, we get a nice big soft brush, and we can shade and render and not worry, or not even have to worry about going outside the lines as we do so. So that's it. So that's flatting. Now let's take a look at a completed page with the entire thing flatted and see what that looks like. Okay, we'll turn off the palette here. So I've begun to render this a little bit. I've been adding blood on top of the inks on top so that they sit above the inks. So all this is going to be red in the end. But as you can see, I can go to my flats layer, right? Use the magic wand and select anything that I want. See how it selected all the skin tone? Because I don't have contiguous selection enabled. So if I enable contiguous, I can now use my flats to just select this hand. Now nothing else selects. If you don't have contiguous selected, when you go to select on your flats, all of the matching pixel color of the crosshair of this tool will become selected and added to the selection. So if we do this, all the skin tone that matches that selection gets selected. Sometimes that's useful, not always. Sometimes that can get you into trouble if you've already rendered some parts and you use your magic wand and duplicate the selection, you put it on top, you can cover up rendering you've already done. So you have to use that with caution. So now we have this right here. We can run our action, and now we've got just the hand on a separate layer, and we can begin to render it. Okay, so that's flatting. It is the process of taking a line art page, separating it out into selections. They can be any color you want. Sometimes you can make it more convenient by using the local color of the objects that are on the page. That can speed things up, but it's not necessary. As long as the color of the objects that are next to another object is different. That's the only requirement. You want to make sure do not enable anti-alias on any of your tools. Make sure none of them have anti-alias. That goes for the paint bucket. That goes for the lasso. That goes for the magic wand. None of them have anti-alias. Make sure that's all off. And then when you build your selections, subtract out other areas that you don't want filled, or use the paint bucket to fill if you don't want to subtract. So that's how you flat. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you learned a little bit about flatting, the process and what it is and what it isn't, what it's used for and why you need it. Also, if you'd like to see me color pages live, I stream on both Twitch and YouTube almost every day. So the links for those will be in the description, and I might even put them on the screen here. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.